Republican governor of Ohio, John Kasich. Governor, thanks for joining us today. What is your reaction to the firing of Steve Bannon? Do you think it's a positive or negative step for the nation?
Well, Jake, listen, that's up to the president. You know, when the problem you have is when you have chaos among your staff in, staff out, new people here, new people there, it's hard to get anything done. You have to be focused. You have to build a team, and it has to be a team that can argue, including argue with the president, like my staff argues with me as the governor. But at the end of the day, we all row in the same direction, and we all have the same purpose. My concern is when you have that kind of chaotic situation in terms of staff, they need to settle it down. But the president clearly has a right to have the people that he wants around him. The way that I believe it works best is when you get people with different points of view. You sit down, you argue out issues carefully, and then at the end you all come together. And if you're not going to go along with the leader, then you have to leave. And so I don't know what all the inner workings are. But they've got to get some stability among the staff. And I think that's probably what General Kelly is trying to do with so many changes here in the last couple weeks. But the changes have to stop, and we have to have a team. You can't keep putting new people in the lineup and think you're going to win a world championship.
You called the president's response to the violence in Charlottesville, quote, pathetic. Mitt Romney says that he thinks President Trump needs to actually apologize to the nation, acknowledge he was wrong, in order to avoid, quote, an unraveling of our national fabric. Do you agree? Do you think President Trump needs to apologize?
I think, Jake, in some ways, we're looking backwards, okay? Where I want to look now is what are we going to do to deal with the fundamental issues that we have in the country, the issue of race, the issue of police and community coming together and developing policing methods that can unify. We've done it in Ohio. The need to reform a welfare system. So instead of just having people do make work, and a lot of people don't know this, if you're on welfare and you get cash assistance right now, you have to work 30 hours a week. People don't know that. If you don't work, we take you off of welfare. The point is that effort, that time you have to put in to be responsible needs to be meaningful. We got to get people to job training so they're not stuck in poverty for generations. We need to think about what we can do to make sure minorities have a piece of the pie, what we have to do in our country to make sure that we begin to discuss the difference between the wealthiest and the poorest in our country. All these things, if we can have a dialogue on that, that is what's going to bring people together. And people who have very different points of view, if they have goodwill, it's amazing how much we can agree upon.
Well, Governor, I think one of the issues is that there are a lot of people in the middle, on the left, even on the right, who are very troubled because they believe President Trump has difficulty condemning white supremacists. Why do you think he does seem to have this issue? Do you think he's concerned about alienating bigots because they might be a part of his base?
Well, look, I didn't see all of his reaction yesterday to the rally in Boston, which was very uplifting. The police were fantastic in the way they handled it. There were so many protesters saying we reject hate. And my understanding is the president came out and praised people, praised the police, praised the fact that the radicals were really marginalized, and that those who marched against hate, he praised. So, look, I think it's all, Jake, about people getting to him and explaining to him we've got to bring the country together. And, you know, blaming one side or another when we're talking about the KKK or white supremacists, there is no comparison between these hate groups and everybody else. So I feel positive about what he had to say about Boston from what I understand in the news reports.
President Trump is scheduled to hold a campaign-style rally in Phoenix, Arizona, Tuesday. The Democratic mayor of Phoenix has expressed concern. He says he hopes President Trump postpones it in light of all the recent events. Glenn Thrush of the New York Times tweeted, quote, lots of nervousness in White House and in Trump's broader circle about this trip to Arizona. Do you have any concerns about President Trump holding this rally on Tuesday in Arizona?
Jake, let me say just a couple things. Look, the president is our president. We want him to be successful. People around him have to get to him, including his own family, to say, okay, you need to show leadership. You need to bring the country together. If you're going to go to Phoenix and make a speech, fine. That's your right. You can go there. He's got free speech just like the rest of us have it. But when you go, try to use that as an opportunity to say something that's going to bring people together. You might recall when he delivered that speech to the Congress The day after, the people on CNN said, well, tonight Donald Trump became president. He has it within him, if he can maintain discipline, he has it within him, I think, to overcome this and move forward. Because if all we're doing is questioning his motives and what's in his heart, and the right and the left, all we're doing is fighting and yelling back and forth, Jake, you're all asking the question, how does the country make it with all this fighting? This is ridiculous at this point. Everybody in America needs to take a deep breath and think about your children and think about our country. We don't do well when all we do is fight. So let's all take a deep breath and let's think about what we can do to heal some of the basic issues in this country, which are still out there. That's why I'm going to go, for example, to Appalachia. A lot of people poor, they're not minorities. They look like you and me, Jake. The fact is, we got to get to the nub of why people think they don't have opportunity, and we need to fix that because America is the land of opportunity. I'm sorry to go on and on here, but I just feel strongly now that we got to just stop it now, and figure out how to find things that we can agree upon.
All right, Governor, stay right there. We have much more to talk about. We're going to take a quick break. Coming up next, we're back with Ohio Governor John Kasich. Governor, according to a report this week, sources close to you are saying there's a growing sense of, quote, moral imperative for President Trump to face a primary challenge in 2020. Now, I know you're not going to announce any plans on my show, and you've made no plans, but if everything continues as it has been, does a Republican need to step forward to challenge President Trump in 3 years?
Well, Jake, as you said, I don't have any plans to do anything like that. I'm rooting for him to get it together. We all are. I mean, we're only like 7 months into this presidency. And, you know, look, what we have to start thinking about, all of us, not just the president, but down where we live, in the neighborhoods, in the communities, we got to build a stronger America. Look, why am I on this show? You asked me to come on. I'm trying to have a responsible voice, to call things out when they need to be called out, but also to support my country. So what I hope is going to happen is I hope we're going to have stability. The president is going to learn from these episodes, and we're going to do better. That's what I hope is going to happen. We'll have to wait and see.
Minutes ago, Defense Secretary Mattis announced that President Trump has made a decision about what to do next in Afghanistan, though we haven't heard what the decision is. This is what you had to say about troop levels in Afghanistan last year. Take a listen.
I now believe we need to get out of Afghanistan. If I were president, I wouldn't be announcing the timeline, but I would give the aircraft that the Afghans need, and I'd get out of there.
There are an estimated 8,400 U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Do you think President Trump should be planning a complete withdrawal of U.S. troops?
Well, I wouldn't be in favor of him trying to add troops. Here's the thing. We've been there 16 years. We went there primarily to make sure that Afghanistan was not going to be a launching pad into the United States with terrorism. We largely have accomplished that. But somehow we've gotten ourselves involved in nation building, trying to build a strong central government in a country where central governments don't work. It's done in a regional way. My view would be, no, I think we need to begin to leave there, and I think we can reserve the opportunity to use intelligence to be able to strike any of these training camps, any of these places where our intelligence community begins to think that they're now building a base and a launching pad that would be harmful to us and to our allies. So continuing to put more troops in is not the way I think we should go. I think we should begin to leave, and then I think we should reserve the opportunity and the right with the proper basing of our forces in the region to be able to strike if we think that there is an effort being made to create another launching pad. But to just stay there after 16 years, I want our people to be able to come home.
North Korea.
Thank goodness I didn't change my mind from a year ago, Jake.
That's right. It's not a good gotcha. You stand by what you said. North Korea, of course, has threatened the U.S. and South Korea ahead of tomorrow's planned military drills between the U.S. and South Korea. North Korea calling them reckless behavior, driving the situation into the uncontrollable phase of a nuclear war. These exercises, of course, come after these weeks of growing tensions in the region, with North Korea focusing on American targets such as Guam and possibly Hawaii. Do you think that the U.S. should consider postponing these drills?
Not at this point. I think if they were like 2 weeks in the future, perhaps we could consider it. But when both General Mattis and Tillerson and negotiators negotiated all over the world, have a sense that we have to keep the pressure on, I agree with that. I will give credit to administration that has talked about how important it is to protect the continental United States and that we're going to have every option on the table. And I think it's gotten the attention of the Chinese. A lot of people poo-poo the Chinese are not going to do anything. Let me just tell you, Jake, if I were the President of the United States and we had a regime like North Korea and they were able to develop the technology to target the United States of America, we would have no choice but to take those systems out. No choice. And it would change the very fabric of that peninsula. And so if the Chinese are worried about what's going to happen in North Korea, the best way to have things happen that they don't like is just to sit back and do nothing. I think they're beginning to put the heat on that dictator over there. So at this point, I think we've continued with the exercises, but we look for a way to get some sort of a freeze on that program, a very viable freeze, and begin to think about how, over time, we could have a more stable group of people who run North Korea.
But you would not only not rule out, but you would enact a preemptive strike if North Korea were proven to be establishing and developing nuclear-capable ICBMs that could hit the United States?
Let me put it to you, well, let me put it to you this way, Jake. I wouldn't take a chance on a government that unstable and a leader who's that erratic to be able to have the capability to launch and to land a missile in Los Angeles and kill people there. Yes, I would reserve that right, and I would make it clear to the Chinese. I would send an envoy to see the Chinese now and say, there is a red line. We are not going to sit back and have our people targeted by this regime, and you can do something about it. And if you don't do something about it, you're going to have to live with the results. Yes, we have to protect Americans before we worry about anything else out here. So what can happen is the Koreans can stop all their crazy testing, and then we can get to a point where we can begin to talk about denuclearizing the whole peninsula. There's a lot of things we can talk about, but it needs to be made very clear to the Chinese. This is in your hands, and you don't want to do anything, you're going to have to live with the result, because we are not going to risk the lives of our people.
I do want to ask you about health care. The Republican effort, obviously, to repeal and replace Obamacare collapsed in the Senate. President Trump has threatened to stop the subsidy payments to Obamacare that help insurance companies pay for those who can afford it. So he made the August payment.
No, that would be a disaster.
You think that he should?
No, you can't do that.
Pledge.
No, he's got to continue to fund it. No, you cannot just cut this off and create more chaos. Look, John Hickenlooper, the governor of Colorado, Democrat, and I are working together on a plan that can stabilize those markets, which we'd be glad to present to people in the Senate. I'm hoping we're going to get an agreement on it. We're getting closer and closer. You got to do this in a bipartisan way, and the thing you have to do is stabilize those insurance markets. And if you want to, take away payments, you're going to create chaos. We can't have that. Let's stabilize those markets first. Let's not worry about Medicaid at this point. Let's get to Medicaid, Social Security, and Medicare in terms of a package to deal with the rising debt we have in this country, and do that in a responsible way. There's ways to get this stuff done, Jake. Believe me, I've been there. I saw us reform welfare. I saw us balance the budget. I saw us reform the Pentagon. We can do it if people will just get off their political soapboxes and begin to think about the country. Because I got a message. We all get old and we all leave this planet. So we're going to be judged in many ways by what we did when we were here. Stop playing games. It just doesn't make any sense. Do something. Be bigger than yourself. Live a life bigger than yourself. That's where we need to go in Washington. That's where we need to go across the board in all of the United States, with business and sports and religion, across the board. Let's get our act together and think bigger than ourselves.
All right, inspirational words from Governor John Kasich. We always appreciate being here, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jake.
Opponents who celebrated the president's decision to fire Steve Bannon may have popped the proverbial champagne a little too soon. The former White House